Die Suid-Afrikaanse kinderpassasiersveiligheidskundige Mohammed Kaka kuier vanoggend in die ateljee om oor vanjaar se kinderpassasiersveiligheidsweek te gesels. So good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity as well.
I would like to start with the Mexico Sea. Just give us more background.
So Mexico Sea have been in existence. It's an international company who've been producing child restraints for close to 30 years now, developing car chairs according to the needs and requirements as the world is evolving in terms of car safety. They've been working on that continuously. So they development, production, and they develop a whole lot of new regulations in line with vehicles and work with vehicle manufacturers as well.
So yeah, if we can talk about the testing, talking about it, that must be quite a lot of testing we've done. You know, with the dummy cars, I just immediately saw the pictures.
Yeah, the process.
You know, and just like the stats, how much safer it is. I mean,
certainly, I think the dynamic is to consider the type of passenger, the item, which is the child restraint, and how it works in the vehicle itself. So you've got 3 different age groups of kids. You've got different kids. Accidents happening in different ways. So your testing needs to coincide with what it is and what's relevant to the actual marketplace and what's happening in terms of accidents, side impact, frontal impact. So the testing is quite rigorous, and that's to ensure that everything works together to ensure that the end result is that you have somebody who's not injured in a collision or possibly could be killed in a collision as a result of a car chair that's not working correctly.
So what is the real need for child restraint when children are traveling in a car?
So effectively, when we get into our cars, our seat belts are generally there to provide the minimum amount of safety when it comes to a collision. So take out airbags and everything else that you get. But what happens is that the seat belt of a vehicle doesn't necessarily work for passengers under 1.3 meters in height. So if you're under that 1.3 meters in height, you need something that either boosts you, holds you together, or basically keeps you in a position such that you're not going to become a projectile in a vehicle or not slide underneath the seatbelt. So child restraint becomes exceptionally important for that.
And what actually happens to a vehicle when it is in a collision, and what road safety aspects are people forgetting, especially when it comes to what is happening within their car and not just on the road?
So I think there's a lot of distractions. Firstly, I think also the conscious behavior of what we do when we get into a vehicle itself. I think we all kind of have this, I'm in a vehicle, I'm in a closed environment, oh well, I'm fine, I'm secure. What we need to take into consideration is that your vehicle and you are traveling at the same speed. But if you're traveling at 60 kilometers per hour, you are in fact traveling at the same speed. What would happen when the vehicle suddenly stops is you become a loose projectile in the vehicle and you end up propelling yourself forward. So that's the first consciousness, to kind of go, okay, what will happen when the vehicle comes to a stop? Develop that consciousness. Then the conscious behavior of, I'm the driver, what's going around me, what's happening with my passengers, and being all around vigilant, all of them play an important part. So we're kind of not taking safety as serious as we should be when it comes to vehicles. We spend a lot of time on cell phones, we're distracted, our kids are crying in the back seat. So what you really want to do is that make sure that everybody's safe, check that our vehicles are good, check that our child restraints are there, our children are adequately locked up and secured, and that should something happen, we will be prepared to deal with the circumstances therearound.
Ek dink ons wil net eens 'n bietjie uitbrei oor hoe jy presies, jy weet die grootte van jou kind, jy weet hoe om te kies, jy weet die produk wat jy moet koop, en ek wil baie graag ook weer uitvind oor wetgewing, net soos met die vorige gas, wat wetgewing, jy weet, beskerm mens. En is hulle streng genoeg, want ek het eintlik nog nooit van iemand gehoor sê, my kind was toe nou nie vas nie en toe kry ek 'n boete nie. So ons het nog 'n hele paar vrae.
Mohammed Kaka kuier vanoggend in die ateljee om oor vanjaar se kinderpassasiersveiligheidsweek te gesels. So I would just like to welcome you again.
Thank you so much again.
And now this week of awareness is done globally. So it's I think you can kind of refer to it as a global movement.
Yes.
And I would just like to find out, how do we compare to other countries in the world when it comes to road safety?
So I think a very value-added comparison I can do is, in South Africa, we're still trying to raise awareness as to the need for a child restraint as opposed to the rest of the world, who are pretty much going and reminding parents to check their car seats. We got a shocking 90% of people or children that should be in car chairs that are not in car chairs. The enforcement of the laws in South Africa is actually quite poor at this moment in time. And hence we on a campaign to raise awareness, to make sure people are understanding But apart from it just being the law, there's a lot that goes around it. There's your kids, even though they are in child restraints, should be in a child restraint that's adequate to them and that would work with them as well. So there are different categories. So South Africa is really far off globally in terms of what's required for child restraints. And our fatality rate's really high in terms of children under the age of 9 years old.
Sure. Let's talk about the age groups, because now I'm thinking, a really small baby can't sit upright, and then children that's 3-year-old or even 9, and when if they're taller than 1.3 meters that we've heard, then you can use a normal seatbelt. So what must parents know?
Okay, so more or less from around newborn up until around 15 months, your child's head is heavier than the rest of the body. If we had to put that child in a car chair that was forward-facing, for example, we would have serious whiplash factors. So hence car chairs that are under 15 months at minimum will be in a rearward-facing direction. We're talking of a child that basically doesn't have adequate muscle, neck, head and spine support, and we keep them in a rearward-facing position. So there's a car chair that's suited specifically around infancy. You then move over to a toddler, where you've got from about 15 months to about 3.5 years old. Your car chairs can now start facing forward. And then from about 3.5 to 7 years, there's a requirement minimum for a booster seat. But at some point, it's very important to consider the height factor. So what a booster seat effectively does is you become a passenger like an adult passenger, but you ensure that the seatbelt doesn't cut across the neck and across your abdomen. And it's the booster seat category of all that's absolutely, completely obliterated. People are not looking at that at all. And that's where we really need to focus on getting children into car chairs as well.
The other thing is people say it's expensive. And I've seen it with how people will ask around for second-hand seats. It happens a lot. There's, I don't know what the costs are, but isn't that also maybe a problem in South Africa in terms of people who just can't afford if you've got 2 children or...
So costs are also related to what a product does.
Yes.
You have different ranges of car chairs. If we had to take into consideration the fact that a car chair in infancy that would last you up until at least 15 months doesn't cost as much as what you're doing when it comes to the vehicle itself. So there are quite a bit of affordable options available. And the length of usage of your car chair may seem like an initial investment, but they do go over long periods of time. So cost is really not an excuse in terms of being able to get a child restrained. If you've got a car, you should be able to factor in as well somewhere.
Definitely.
In essence, what is the main message that we want to get out to anyone who transports children in a vehicle during this child passenger safety campaign?
Okay, so firstly and most importantly, the need for the child restraint. We need to get South Africans to understand that. We need to have driver-conscious behavior as to all my passengers in my car, are they safe? Then it comes to those passengers or parents who have had child restraints in their car. Find out whether your child restraint is correct, because there are a number of safety concerns. Are you using it correct? Is it appropriate to your child's age category? And how well do they work? So even those that do have child restraints, we're asking you to familiarize yourself with them. Go into your stores, check that everything's right, and ensure that the safety that you're purchasing for your child restraint is going to be optimal when it's actually needed itself.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
En dit was dan die Suid-Afrikaanse kinderpassasiersveiligheidskundige Mohammed Kaka.